Now, fires, building collapses, and corruption are among sources of pain and frustration for some African citizens. Many are expressing outrage over the lack of accountability for public officials. For more insight, Irungu Houghton, the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya, joins me live via Skype from Nairobi. Good evening, Irungu.
Good evening, Vincent, and great to be on the show again.
Thank you. Now, it's not the first time we hear, people dying, things happening where you can blame negligence. We have had even schools burn in Kenya and children die. How can governments take responsibility and hold people accountable for this? In Senegal, we've seen a minister has been fired, but how much should be done to satisfy citizens?
Unfortunately, as Amnesty International, we see too many cases of negligence or deliberate human rights violations. And I guess for us, what's really important is to recognize that impunity and the lack of accountability is probably the deepest threat to statecraft. It's the deepest threat to an effective state or a responsive state. And for leadership, really the concern is that they often say that good leaders either have a conscience or they are fearful of consequences, and bad leaders have neither. And I think this is what we see in a situation like this.
Now, do you think the leadership may take advantage sometimes of the ignorance of the masses? I mean, apart from people like you, a majority of the people never know who is supposed to be held accountable for a particular issue.
Well, here's the thing. I think in the case of Senegal, what we were seeing there was that there was public outcry, and that forced the hand of the president to take action on his minister. And I think this is what we do need to see in all of the African countries, where there is a woke citizenry who are able to, first of all, know what crime has been committed, and secondly, what needs to be done. And it's not always the case that a administrative action, like, for example, the dismissal of a minister, needs to happen. In some cases, we do need to see criminal prosecution. But, if Julius Nyerere was still alive, he would probably argue that servant leadership would require people to step aside and take responsibility. And this is what we see in many developed countries, that people actually, voluntarily step aside. They don't have to be pushed from office.
And we know that in many countries we've seen, people have committed even financial crimes, and people have been involved in embezzlement of billions of dollars just walking around and holding public office.
I mean, I think, there are a number of, there are a number of really infractions of leadership. And it ranges from, a moment of arrogance. I do remember the Deputy Chief Justice, for example, pinching the nose of a security guard as she walked through a mall. And said, "Do you know who I am?" And in that case, the Chief Justice, Willy Mutunga, actually institute proceedings for the Deputy Chief Justice to step down. Or cases of impunctuality. The stories of President Kagame holding his cabinet ministers and roasting them when they come into meetings late is another good example. But I think where there are issues of gross negligence, we do need to see very clear actions. And corruption is just one of those. In Kenya today, we are bracing for the Electoral Commission's list of applicants or aspirants that will be cleared for the 2022 elections. And sadly, it is probably the case that several of those cases, I think we are hearing figures like 40% of the people who came through the primaries will be tainted characters.
Wow,
and
so
you
sad.
cannot imagine what a kind of a state that would look like, to have 40% of its oversight, parliamentary bodies, and the executive people of questionable, character.
Really sad. And thank you very much, Irungu Houghton is the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya. We really appreciate your insights there.